In this lesson, we're going to learn how to create a simple camera cinematic. Alright, so to begin, let's select our matinee object and let's rename it to something a little more descriptive. Come up to your details panel and we're going to leave matinee actor and then I'm going to type in underscore cinematic. Make sure that you're descriptive with your names on your matinee objects because it is very easy to have many different matinee actors in the scene. And so having them named properly is going to be very helpful. Now what we want to do is we want to create a camera in our scene. To create a camera, we'll simply come up to our Modes panel, Place tab, Basic, and then Camera. Left click and drag that into your scene, and then you can move the camera around and put it into the proper position. Now moving cameras and placing them this way can be a little tedious sometimes. We know that we can move around in our viewports very quickly by using W, A, S, and D, and so we may want to be able to do that with a camera and get the exact position that we would like. So I'm going to show you a different way of adding cameras to the scene. Let's simply left click on this one, and actually, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and leave it in this position because I'm going to use this one a little bit later. So let's kind of get this position to where we're looking at the scene kind of from an angle, and we want to really focus on the elevator that's in the scene here. But I kind of want to do just this panning shot at this angle. So I want to start off at an angle kind of like this. Now I'm only using my viewport to get this angle. And once I have that preferred angle, I can come up to this pop-out menu here, and I can come down and say Create Camera Here. Now by doing that, you'll see that a camera has been created at the exact same angle that I see here. Now we may want to come in and move this camera around a little bit more. So let's say that we've moved around and we're looking at that camera, we're like, no, it's not quite exactly what I want. Well, what we can do now is with that camera selected, we can come up to that pop-out menu and we could say Lock Viewport to Actor, and then in this case we have our camera selected and we're going to say Camera Actor 10. So with that, we're back at our camera's view, and then I can just use my mouse controls again to move that camera and get the exact angle that I want. So then something like this, and then all I have to do is simply come in and say Unlock from Camera Actor 10. And there we go. So now my camera has been moved around, and you can see exactly how we can use cameras to their fullest capabilities, okay, whenever it comes to placing them. So let's take this camera right here and let's simply pan it across the room. Okay. So to do that, we'll need to select our matinee object, and we'll open that up from the existing matinee objects list. So with your camera still selected, click on Matinee Actor Cinematic. Let's dock that right up here in our tabs. And because we're wanting to use a camera animation and we want to pan that camera across, we're going to create what's called a camera group. Now groups and tracks need to be created right here in your tracks panel. So we're going to right click and we're going to add a new camera group. Now by doing so, we'll need to rename it. So we're going to call this Camera 01. Actually, let's call it Camera 02 because I have another camera that I'm going to use first. Okay, so this is Camera 02. With this camera, you'll see that I get two tracks created automatically. I get a movement track and I get a field of view angle track. The movement track is going to be where we add keys that control the movement of the camera. So that can be moving with the move tool, the rotation tool in that. And then we have the field of view angle. This is where we can scale down the zoom of the camera itself or its field of view. Now by default, you'll notice that we get this keyframe on our movement track at frame 0. That's always going to be given to you. Okay? And so all we need to do is set up the second point that the camera is supposed to animate toward. Now before we get into all of that, let's talk about the tracks editor and talking about the timeline a little bit more, because there may be some things in here that you may not be sure of. So the first thing is this white bar here across the bottom. This is going to allow you to scroll back and forth across your timeline. This is a great way of finding certain times on that timeline very quickly. You also have the scrubber, which is this little black bar. And if you drag this across, this is where your timeline, when it plays, you'll watch this go across the time in a consistent speed. You'll also notice that we have these different colored triangles here across the bottom. We have a red one and we have a green one. The red one denotes the beginning of the animation, at what time it starts, and then the end of the animation. So in this case, I want this camera to go ahead and just animate across, let's say, 2 seconds. So I'm going to left click and drag this red triangle, and I'm going to drag this across to 2 seconds here. Now you'll notice that there was some snapping there, and that's because I have snaps turned on. Now we can also grab the green arrow, and the green arrow represents the active preview of the animation. So whenever it plays, it's only going to play from 0 to 1. So if I left click and drag that all the way out to the end of the animation, it's going to play that full animation. It's going to preview that for us. Perfect. So now that we've talked about the major parts of the timeline, let's add a key. So to add a key, we want to go ahead and take our time slider to the desired position, in this case 2 seconds, and we're going to add a key. You can do this by also hitting enter on your keyboard. But in this case, let's click on the button here. You'll see that it has added a key, and we also have it selected, and it's telling us that key movement 1, okay, this keyframe, is active and it's waiting for the information to be input. So to input information into this keyframe, we'll simply go to our scene with the selected actor, and we're going to left click and drag that across in the X direction. I'm going to continue to drag that until it comes up to the elevator about this point here. Then I can also rotate that camera to face the elevator. So if I hit E on the keyboard, I can rotate the camera to where it's straight on with the elevator and the wall. So once I have that positioned, I can come back and I can grab my move tool again, and I can center that up in the camera view a little bit more. So let's do something kind of like that. Okay, so it looks pretty good. So what's going to happen in this animation? Well, it's going to move from point A to point B, and while it's moving, it's going to rotate into this position in between these 2 points. So to preview this, we'll come up to our Matinee interface. Let's go ahead and break this off so we can see it a little bit easier. And I'm actually going to take it off screen. All we have to do at this point is simply hit play. So play is going to be right up here in your toolbar. And whenever you hit play, you'll see your camera plays from point A to point B, and it's playing the movement. Now you could also hit loop, and you can watch that over and over again, and it's going to continue to play until you hit stop, which is right next to loop. So let's hit stop, and then if we want to make it play at the very beginning, we'll hit stop one more time, and then we'll hit play. Perfect. So that's how we can preview our cinematic. Now what I want to do is I want to come up and say File, Save All. And what that's going to do is it's going to save all of my information in Matinee and in the level itself. So we're going to say yes. It's going to close down Matinee because it's saving everything. Whenever you save your level or anything like that, or built lighting, it's going to shut down Matinee. It must do that. Alright, so let's go ahead and hit play and let's see what happens. You'll notice that our first person player is in the scene and we're not seeing our cinematic. Why isn't that? Well, we haven't actually told it to play the cinematic from the beginning of the level. And so what we'll need to do is we'll need to get into Blueprint to allow that to happen. And we'll get into that in our next lesson.